Some of our most impactful plays go far beyond the court or field. This is the Net to Net Live Show.
It's more than just a game.
Welcome back to week 3 of the Net to Net Live Show. How are you feeling, Monte?
I'm doing good. I'm very, very excited. We had a very exciting weekend in sports, especially with the Premier League and the NBA. We had 30 teams playing in the NBA yesterday. Very good sports weekend. I'm feeling good. What about you?
FNTN_podcast and Spotify as well. So if you're a fan, go listen. Let's run up those numbers. What caught your eye over the weekend? What are some things you want to talk about?
I want to start off with the Premier League this weekend. We had 2 match slates that we're going to be covering in this episode, starting off with a pretty massive upset. Bournemouth versus Manchester City. Bournemouth ended up winning the game 2-1. And what were your takeaways from that? It was a pretty big headline over the weekend.
I mean, you said upset, and I think it's one of the biggest we've seen, especially since this was Bournemouth's first ever time beating Man City. So a historic win for them. And for Man City as well, it was their first loss in 32 games. So in the Premier League, they hadn't lost for 32 games, and that goes back almost a year. The last time they lost the match was December 6th of 2023. So it's a very impressive run. It was an amazing performance by Bournemouth. You know, sometimes Man City have these games where they don't look the best. They're kind of fluky. And this is one of them. Usually, Man City are dominant. No matter what game they play, even if the result doesn't go their way, their performance is one that shows Man City was the better team. This weekend, that was not the case. Manchester City didn't have their first shot on target until late in the 70th minute. So it took them almost the entire game to have their first shot on target. And yeah, eventually they got a goal back, but it just wasn't enough because Bournemouth got off to an amazing start. They scored their goal early. They had big chances early on. Ederson made some big saves. And they kept the pressure on. That was important. Usually teams, they'll score against Man City, then they'll sit back. Bournemouth did not do that. They scored and they kept the pressure on. They got shots off. They forced saves. And yeah, Man City missed a couple of chances, but Bournemouth were the better team on the night. Evan Lisson got the second goal of the night, and he's been a great addition since Solanke was sold. He hasn't backed up Solanke's goal-scoring numbers yet, but the impact has been there. What did you make of the performance?
I'm pretty sure you just nailed everything right on the head, but like you said, sometimes in other sports, it's pretty common for these championship contenders to have those very faltery games against inferior teams, but we hadn't seen Manchester City lose in over a year, like you said, so this genuinely came as a shock for everyone, and it was just uncharacteristic play from Manchester City right from opening kickoff. Literally in the first minute, Nathan Ake held possession for so long that he ended up turning it over, and Bournemouth had numbers, and like you said, Ederson bailed them out multiple times throughout the game, including the possession that I just mentioned. The first goal by Antoine Semenyo, I thought Manchester City played actually pretty well in a set defense, but it was just really good playing the ball up the side and crossing it to Semenyo, and then he turned around and finished. And then, like you said, throughout the game, Manchester City had every opportunity to score, and they just didn't capitalize. They had multiple missed headers, especially the late one by Haaland, which must have been a killer for City fans. And then in the 50th minute, Foden shot a ball wide, and then he missed another one wide in the 90th minute. So just throughout the game, really poor execution. And then on Bournemouth's side, they had a great pace. They were taking advantage of City's lack of attention to detail on the counterattacks. That's how Evan Nielsen was able to score his goal to put Bournemouth up 2-0. And just very creative defensive scheming. They were kind of running like a free safety defense almost, where they'd play low and then they'd pressure the ball very quickly. If it wasn't for Ederson, this game could have gone really, really ugly for Manchester City. The score does not reflect how bad they played. I know it's very close, but it wasn't close at all in terms of the effort, the defense, the discipline, and just taking advantage of opportunities that are given to you that Bournemouth did and Manchester City didn't.
I think this goes to show how important Rodri was to that team. Rodri's out for the season, and it's interesting to see how Man City will adapt to that. Rodri, of course, won the Ballon d'Or last week, and he's just crucial to this team. This is their second loss in a row. They lost in the Cup to Tottenham Hotspur, and that loss they weren't too concerned about because I think Guardiola went into that game knowing that there's a good chance he'll lose because he started a lot of lesser known players. Nico O'Reilly and James McAtee started in the Cup, youth players, and then he subbed on Jacob Wright and Jemiah Simpson Pussy. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his name, but yeah. So the second loss in a row. The performance against Spurs, I'm sure they'll get over. They weren't too bothered about that. But this performance, this loss will hurt because it directly influences the title challenge. And we've talked about the title challenge for a few weeks now. Every week we have a different conversation. Last week it was Liverpool. The week before we talked about Arsenal. Now Man City, I don't know how they'll bounce back. I'm sure they'll find a way because Guardiola teams always do. It's always they get off to a slow start, they have a hiccup, and then at the end of the year, you'll see they're at the top of the table. You don't know how they got there. They just rattle off wins after wins. But with Rodri not in the team, it might be a bit more difficult.
Yeah, like you said, it's a very close title challenge this year, as it is every year. But when you have these types of games that are give-me's against much inferior opponents, you're supposed to get the job done. If you're drawing or you're winning, but in like sloppy fashion against highly competitive teams, it's not necessarily acceptable, but it's understandable. This type of game, it's not acceptable, nor is it understandable. Just Manchester City completely humiliated, and yeah, they could have major ramifications on the title challenge.
And just last thing, it does come down to their strike force as well. They sold Julian Alvarez over the summer, so their only true striker is Erling Haaland with Oscar Bob out injured. And Haaland was not able to score in this game. Haaland is on a bit of a rough patch. Of course, he has 11 goals in 10 Premier League games. That's an amazing stat. Anyone else was doing that, I'd say amazing. Give him like the Ballon d'Or, give him everything. But when you look into the context of it, he's only scored one in his last 5 games, and that one goal was against Southampton, who are in the relegation zone. His other goals have come a hat-trick against Ipswich, also in the relegation zone, a hat-trick against West Ham, and we'll get on to West Ham in a second. They've been terrible this year.
Yeah.
So most of his goals have come against bad teams. In the big games, he does tend to disappear sometimes. And you just have to question how good of a player he really is. He's a good finisher, sure, but can he step up when Man City need him most this season? I guess we'll have to see.
Some good takes. And like you just said, West Ham. That brings us to our next match slate that we're going to be covering. Nottingham Forest winning 3-0 over West Ham. Give me your takeaways.
3-0, West Ham did not look good. Of course, it didn't help that they got a red card pretty early on, so that could have changed the course of the game. But even before that, and just this season in general, West Ham have not looked like a good team. So this Forest win moved them up into 3rd place in the Premier League. So
wow.
I guess they're title challengers as of right now. Of course, we do expect them to drop as the season prolongs, but it was a good game for them. They got goals from Chris Wood, who is now in the Golden Boot race as well. He's been on fire this season. Callum Hudson-Odoi, the former Chelsea player, and Aina. It was good goals all around, good play all around. The Forest just capitalized on the advantage. They're out to a strong start. They finished 17th last season, just barely missing relegation. And for them to be up to 3rd this season, it's a really big thing for them.
Yeah, so I'm just going to give my thoughts on that game. West Ham may as well have not even shown up to the game. That's how bad it was. I think even giving them an F seems generous for how they played. They were just giving up open passing lanes all game. Terrible marking from every single person. But credit to Nottingham Forest for being able to expose that early and often, especially on that first goal where Chris Wood exposed an easy goal, or scored an easy goal initiated by Alex Moreno's ability to create an open space. And then you mentioned Alvarez's red card that just added salt to the wound. That happened because they gave another deep pass down the sideline, and it was Anthony Alonga who had so much field ahead of him, and then Alvarez just had to make a very impulsive decision on the fly and ended up costing them the game. Nottingham Forest was just the better team all around. Hudson Odoi with the beautiful goal outside of the box off a free kick set, and then Ada scored his own beauty outside of the box in the 77th minute. If it wasn't for a few misses from guys like Moreno, Milenkovic, Awonye, an offside call, and some heroics by Fabianski, this game could have legitimately ended 8-0. That's how bad it was. The back line and the midfield for West Ham made so many critical errors when I was watching the game. Like, they were throwing bad passes in their own territory, and that just generates the opposing offense more than your own. Great off-ball movement, advantage creation off errors, and just fluidity on every level that allowed Nottingham Forest to move up to third now in the Premier League, like you said.
Yeah, I think a lot of West Ham's mistakes came from just not knowing who they were up against. You mentioned Anthony Alanga. He's one of the quickest players in the Premier League. If you know you're up against a quick player, you can't give him that much space, which results in a red card. Hudson Odoi, he does a lot of things pretty well. There's one thing he's exceptional at. He scored countless goals at this, and that's cutting in on the left-hand side, cutting in on his right foot and curling it in. He's scored so many goals like that, and he's one of those players who's he has that one specialty. You think about it, it's Callum Hudson-Odoi. I want to put him up there with his right foot finishes outside of the box. James Ward-Prowse with his free kicks, he's known for that. Rory Delap with his throw-ins. There's a few players who, they're average all around, but they have one thing that they're world-class at, and I think Callum Hudson-Odoi, can officially qualify for that. He's just been that one thing stellar at. He's been crazy, that one finish.
So it was a pretty exciting Premier League matchup of slates. So now let's talk some basketball. The NBA weekend, like I said at the start of the episode, we had every single team play yesterday. So what we're going to introduce is our favorite game from yesterday's match slate. But before we do that, let's talk rookies. We're going to try and make a top 5 or a top 3 list rookie power rankings, and just give me a name right now. Let's go back and forth of the best rookies from this year's class.
For me, I think the Pelican center, Yves Missi, he has to stand out. I mean, going into the draft, a lot of people considered him a bit underrated. He averaged 10 and 5 at Baylor, and for the Pelicans, it seemed like it was going to be an amazing pickup because they had a slot open for him in the center spot. He had a lot of opportunity coming into the season. In college, he was a great defensive player, and that's translated to the NBA. He was the 21st overall pick, and a lot of people compared his role to the role that Derek Lively had with the Mavs because, last season he came in, the center spot was available on the Mavericks, and Derek Lively was able to have a very impactful rookie season. And of course, Lively didn't win Rookie of the Year because he was in the same draft class as Wemby. But for Yves Missi, in a much weaker draft class, I think he has a real shot. His strengths are standing out with his defense, and he's making an impact on a team who's hopeful to be a playoff contender. They have a lot of injuries, but hopefully once those injuries come back, they can solidify themselves as a playoff contender. And Yves Missi's impact on not just winning, but also putting up stats can really help that.
I think it's good that maybe these injuries are a blessing in disguise because now it's allowing him to get more reps to develop so that when those guys come back, like DeJounte Murray, CJ McCollum, and then obviously the inevitable Zion Williamson injury throughout the year, he has such a high motor, like you said, great anchor on defense. I think the Pelicans can be super legit, and Yves Missi is going to be a building block for that. But now, speaking of building blocks for the future, I want to talk about Washington Wizards guard Carlton Carrington, or they call him Bub Carrington, drafted out of Pittsburgh this year. He's averaging 10 points a game, 5 assists, and 4 rebounds a game at 19 years old. He's a super crafty combo guard, and he's just like a well-balanced guard all around. You see it in the statistics, but you also see it in his game. Offensively, he has such a nice dribble package, a really nice pull-up game, and the one thing that stands out about him is he has really dominant pace. Like the way he pushes the ball up the floor, the way he's able to make quick reads in transition, but also just when he's driving baseline, it's incredible for a 19-year-old. And then I think the Wizards really have a future gem in Carrington. If he just improves his shooting consistency numbers a little bit, he can be legit.
Yeah, the Wizards, they've been bad this season. Obviously, they've lost a lot of games, but coming into it, I really thought this Wizards team was one that could have been one of the worst NBA teams of all time, and they're not looking like that. They've actually looked pretty exciting, and Bob Carrington is part of that reason. You know, it's always nice to have a young spark in your team that you can look forward to, that can give you more as the years prolong. For me, another candidate, it's not really a Rookie of the Year candidate, but just as a tandem, I think they have to be mentioned. The Raptors rookies have looked phenomenal this year. Battle, Mobo, and Jamal Shed, they all deserve a mention. They're not going to win. They don't have the stats to back it up, especially since with the time you would allocate to one rookie, you're sharing among three. So they don't have the time to put up the stats, but the impact is there. Shed is leading rookies in assists, averaging 4.8, tied with Bob Carrington. And Mobile is just, his engine is unmatched. His hustle is unmatched. If you could add a bit of shooting to his game, that'd be nice, because right now he's basically playing as an undersized 5. He's pretty small as a 5, and he can't shoot, so he can't really play any other position right now. But just their impact has to be mentioned. Again, amazing drafting by the Raptors, both in the second round. They've looked good. Who else would you like to talk about?
I can't continue this episode without mentioning Ryan Dunn out of Phoenix. What an absolute steal. He was a late second round pick, drafted out of Virginia. He was heading into the draft class already noted as a top 3 defender in the draft class at the worst, but many regarded him as the best, and he's easily showing that. Budenholzer, a defensive-minded coach, is already trusting him to be guarding team's number 1 this season. Insane versatility 1 through 5, very high motor on closeouts, and he just has very great instincts on help defense. And he's taking on that task so confidently in guarding team's number 1. Like, he was facing up LeBron in those 2 matchups in the clutch against the Lakers. Like, credit to him. But his offensive game is what's really surprising, because in college, he had horrible shooting numbers. He was only shooting 1 3-point attempt per game on roughly 20% shooting. He had no motor on offense, very inconsistent, lack of confidence, but I think Phoenix was the perfect situation for him to come into. When you have some of the best shot creators in the world, like Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, it just opens up the world for you. And he's playing his role phenomenally. He's shooting roughly 5 attempts per game at like a 36% clip, which is a massive jump compared to his college numbers like I just talked about. So I think Ryan Dunn's been phenomenal, and if Phoenix continues to be on the pace that they're at as a team, he's going to get his recognition. I love Ryan Dunn.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, he came in as like a non-shooter. People were not expecting him to really shoot that much. They weren't expecting him to be good at shooting. But just to be able to step in and take someone like Bradley Beal's spot for the season and fill that role pretty sufficiently says a lot about the kind of player he can be. Finally, I want to mention for my pick, Bronny James.
Oh my God.
Just give it to him. Give him the Rookie of the Year. Make it a moment.
Bro, stop glazing.
No,
Stop.
listen. Hear me out. Per 36, he's averaging 9 points, 9 assists, 4.5 rebounds, and 4.5 steals. Do you know how crazy 4.5 steals is? Just give him more minutes. He'll win the Rookie of the Year for sure. No, but on a serious note, I think Zach Edey has to be mentioned. Zach Edey has been great. He came in, everyone's like, big body, how is he going to adapt? Because we've seen a lot of 7+ footers not really translate to the league. I don't know, a couple of, like Luka Garza came in and he was mid. He's been mid, I'm sorry. But Zach Edey looks like he might be able to translate to the league. He's averaging 11 points per game, and that is important because there actually hasn't been a rookie to win Rookie of the Year who wasn't averaging double digits since like the 1950s. And that was a shared Rookie of the Year between Mel Hutchins and Bill Toshev. So I'll be honest, I have no idea who those are, but that's just some NBA history for you. And the one the lowest point per game average who wasn't them was Malcolm Brogdon's rookie season.
It's my guy.
10.2 points per game. But yeah, Zach Edey, 11 points per game right now, 64% from the field. I mean, you expect him to shoot efficiently from the field because all his shots should be near the rim. He shouldn't really be taking any threes or long twos. But just that big body makes him an elite screener for Ja Morant, for all the other Desmond Bain. You know, his shooting is definitely gonna blossom from the screen setting of Zach Edey. He has great spatial awareness on the pick and roll, and obviously with that height, he's gonna be an amazing rebounder, and he is. He's gonna get his rebounds, and teams might try to target him, you know, because being as big as he is gonna be more slow-footed than the rest of the centers in the league. Though we'll see how he adapts as the season prolongs. For now, he is looking like a strong candidate for Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, Edey, a lot of people had their fair share of criticisms for him coming out of Purdue, saying, oh, he was just smurfing in college and, you know, getting all these points just because he's 7'4" and he can play near the rim. But like you said, he's translating pretty well to the NBA, at least on, well, both ends of the floor. Offensively, it's been a surprise, right? Having great touch near the rim, like you said. Very deliberate screener. He knows how to work in the pick and roll. But if he can just clean up his frame a little bit, because like you said, teams are going to attack his lateral quickness. Teams are going to attack his slower speed. If he can just slimmer up a little bit the way that, I guess, near a Chet Holmgren type of frame, he could be super, super legit in the league. And he's in a bigger market in Memphis, and he already had so much hype coming out of Purdue. So I think right now he's the leading favorite, but this rookie class is really, really special, but very, very raw at the same time. Like, the consistency issues with the whole class are something to be noted, but the high upside that's shown, the flashes that are shown, it's a very, very special class if they can all hit their potential.
I think it's a special class in the terms of they might not produce an all-star in year 2 or year 3 even, but it's a class that I think can impact winning more than any other. Because a lot of these rookies have been drafted into winning positions. You look at Zach Edey, for example. The Grizzlies, they have winning aspirations with Ja Morant and Desmond Bain. The Suns, they want to win. So I think these rookies, more than any other class, can make their impact not necessarily through individual stats, but team success. And just for your final rookie, I think we talked about Zach Edey. There's another Grizzlies rookie you wanted to mention. What are your thoughts on him? Have you liked him so far?
I loved him right now. His name is Jalen Wells, and right now he's leading all rookies in scoring with 9.8 points per game, and a pretty balanced player, I'd say. He's dishing out the ball pretty well, 2 assists per game, and he's a very active rebounder, 4 rebounds per game. The Grizzlies, like you said, are one of the best developmental systems that anyone can come into the NBA. Look at last year. They had Gigi Jackson, Vince Williams, Scottie Pippen Jr., all being legitimate pieces to build around, along with their contending level pieces like Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bain. But I'm not going to stray too much off topic. With Jalen Wells, he is such a good shooter. Like, he can score consistently on all 3 levels. He draws closeouts hard. He can manipulate the scoring, whether it's shooting a floater, getting a pull-up. And just one criticism that I have for him is that I think he needs to be more confident heading to the rim. That way he's just not being like a pure shooter, and that can open up more for his shot creation. But again, a very well-rounded player on both sides of the ball, very versatile, and he's going to be legit. The Grizzlies, once again, hit a gem.
My only worry with the Grizzlies and his development is that they do have a lot of bodies, as you said. Like last year, they discovered a lot of new people, and it's one of those people get back from injury. Will he have the same opportunity to produce as he's doing right now? When Vince Williams comes back, when Gigi Jackson comes back, there's just more bodies that are going to need to get more minutes, and we'll have to see if he can adapt to that and play for his playing time, fight for his playing time. So some of these rookies have been surprising. Most in a good way, some in a bad way. But no one really expected too much of this rookie class. But this season, we did have some expectations. And I want to hear what's one of your surprises from the season. What's something that caught you off guard? It can be in a good or bad way.
I think I'm going to go with one good and one bad. For the good, I'm going to say the Brooklyn Nets. I think a lot of people in the media, and especially myself, they just kind of felt like they were going to tank this year fully, like try to lose every game, but at least be competitive. But that's not the case at all. They're competitive and they're winning games. They hired Jordi Fernandez from the Kings this season, and what a difference he's made. Everyone's buying in. The culture is so legit, and a lot of their guys are taking legitimate steps in their game. Cam Thomas, he's still one of the most elite pure scorers in all of basketball, but he's unlocking that playmaking aspect of his game too. Dennis Schroeder, they brought in to be a veteran presence, and he's averaging like 20 points and 7 assists per game, and super, super clutch, by the way. Yesterday, he just hit a game winner against the Grizzlies. But the Nets, I don't know what their ambitions are for this season. I don't know if they're trying to make a playoff push or they're just kind of showing early sparks and then fading off as the season goes. But as of right now, the Nets are super, super impressive. Very deep team. There's guys like Claxton contributing, Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, a couple of 3-and-D guys that are also contributing to high-level winning basketball. But what about you?
Well, just on the Nets, 3-and-D, we have someone who was all D, no 3. Ben Simmons also has been pretty good for the Nets. Not necessarily in points. He's never going to get back to, 16 points per game, 17 points per game. Sixers Ben. But he's been facilitating. He's been, rebounds, assists. He's looked aggressive in a couple of games, and that's good signs for, I'm sure, that all the Ben Simmons fans that still exist. And for the Nets, they're 4-4. I think their fans will want them to start losing a bit because it's a year where they finally have their pick. They got their picks back, so they start off good. They'll probably start tanking near the end of the season, but we'll see how it goes.
It's a very encouraging sign for the future, though. If you're being able to compete with legitimate teams like Memphis and Denver, I'm trying to think of who else. They gave the Bucks a run for. They beat the Bucks actually. Very, very impressive signs early on, but ideally, like you said, they should probably start tanking because Cooper Flag, Ace Bailey, RJ Davis, you don't want to miss out on one of those guys.
Yeah, not in this draft class. For my good, I'm going to give you a little bit of a quiz. Try to guess who this player is, okay? I'm going to read out some stats for you. So almost 23 points per game, 2.8 steals per game, 1.2 blocks, 45% from 3 on almost 9 attempts, and 5 assists to go with that. Immediately, what kind of player comes to your mind? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking of one of the more well-rounded two-way players in the league, so that sounds like, I know he hasn't played this season, but just off like general stats, like a Paul George-esque player.
Yeah, this player sounds phenomenal, and this season, we talk about surprising, he's been good, and it's Jordan Poole. These are Jordan Poole's stats. Yes, sir. He's averaging almost 3 steals, averaging 23 points per game.
End the episode right now.
I looked at this morning. I was like, he's been good the last couple of games. Let me see what he's averaging. And his averages are kind of crazy. I think 45% from 3 on 9 attempts itself that's wild. And yeah, he's been, and the Wizards, as we mentioned, has been one of my surprises. Him and Bilal Coulibaly, Jordan Poole brings the offense. Bilal Coulibaly locks it up in defense. And he's scoring almost 18 points per game. Last night, they had a pretty fun game against the Warriors. I don't know if you saw that little exchange between Poole and Draymond. So
what exchanges haven't they had in the last few years? Wait, what was it?
So basically, Jordan Poole crosses up Draymond and like hits like a step back three. And then after he hits the three, he points at Draymond all the way back as they run down the court. And then as the quarter ends, the very next play, Draymond dishes out to Steph. Steph hits a three. And then Draymond points to Poole as the quarter ends.
Bro, why is Draymond taking credit for
That's
something
what I'm
he
saying.
didn't even do? Yo, I
I
actually
know.
can't stand this guy, bro.
Draymond basically is like, yeah, you see what Steph did to you? And Poole's like, okay, but I hit the three on you. So that was a pretty funny interaction. But yeah, the Wizards have been surprisingly good, and especially Jordan Poole. So we got into some good things. What's like a bad thing that has surprised you in a negative way?
I know we've talked about it in a previous episode, but I genuinely cannot help myself at this point because it's getting uglier by the day. The Milwaukee Bucks. Okay? But before I get into the specifics of it, in the recent episodes, not only did we talk about the Milwaukee Bucks, but we also talked about the Denver Nuggets and their slow start. Over the weekend, we talked about this off camera. 2 quotes came up from 2 players of those respective teams, and they were very concerning signs. I don't have the quotes on me verbatim, but like the general context came from Giannis Antetokounmpo, their franchise player from the Bucks, and Michael Porter Jr. from the Nuggets. Giannis was talking about like these trade rumors are really starting to heat up now, and he's saying that we don't have an identity. Do you know how concerning that is when your franchise player comes out and says, we don't have an identity, we're lost every game, we're not organized? That's the last thing that Giannis said before Adrian Griffin got fired last year, which is possibly foreshadowing for the departure of Doc Rivers. Okay? The Bucks are a disaster this year. 1-6 now. Giannis and Dame are literally having all NBA caliber seasons. How do you lose back-to-back games to the Cavs, choking and then reverse choking? Like, only Darvin Ham and Doc Rivers could possibly pull that out of the bag. In the first game they had against the Cavs, Dame hit 10 threes and Giannis had a 30-point triple-double. And they were up 20. They lost that game. Would you not be surprised if I told you that? Like,
That's like, once you see those stats, you see Giannis 30, you see Dame above 30, you just assume they won. You're like, my superstars are excelling. Of course we won this game.
even their bench players stepped up that game, that first match. It was like Bobby Portis played well, Brook Lopez played well. They still lost that game. And then in the second matchup, it was just yesterday. They played the Cavs again. They were down 20, brought it back, and then still lost. Like, it's so concerning. And AJ Green had a fantastic game. Damian Lillard played his heart out. Granted, they didn't have Giannis, but still, you were up 20. Just get the job done.
I mean, I guess you take some inspiration. Like, at least we came back. At least it wasn't a 20-point blowout. But that kind of makes it even more heartbreaking that you came back and you let it slip. I just don't know what they do from here. Is it another coaching change? Where are you going to go? I think it went downhill since trading Drew. I think that was the downfall of the Bucks.
Thank you, Milwaukee. I know they didn't trade him directly to us, but thank you.
And these are all, you can't really blame the front office because the front office has tried to give Giannis everything he's ever wanted. You know, a small market team, they found a superstar and they were like, we're going to do everything we can to keep him happy. Giannis wanted change. They traded Drew for Dame. Giannis wanted a head coach to change. They fired Griffin and brought in Doc Rivers, which was not a great decision.
And here's the thing. It's like, I don't even know if they can do that for two reasons. One, I think it would just completely derail your season again. Like, if you have to adjust to a new system, a new personality in the locker room, buy into a different vision. But also, it's just, is ownership going to be willing to cough up more money for another coach's payroll? Because they're still paying Mike Budenholzer. They're still paying Adrian Griffin. They're still... and now they have Doc Rivers, who is one of the 7 highest paid coaches in the NBA at like $13 million. But the Bucks are a disaster. Giannis came out and said that. And then just very, very briefly on the Nuggets so that we can hear you too. But Michael Porter Jr. came out and said something about if we do not win it all this year, things might have to be changed. Like they might split us up. So we hit the nail on the head with that prediction with the Denver Nuggets. They're winning games, but it's very, very ugly fashion against teams that they should be smoking. Again, another overtime or near overtime game versus the Raptors. If RJ Barrett hits that game winner, you go out cold. The Nuggets are a disaster too, but I want to touch upon the Bucks specifically. What about you?
Yeah, just real quick. I think we got both of our predictions pretty. We predicted that the Nuggets would probably blow it up sooner rather than later, and our bold take that the Bucks won't make the playoffs is starting to look better as time goes on. For me, the Warriors have been good. You know, they've been a great team this season. They missed Steph Curry for a week last week, and they still managed to pull out a couple of impressive wins against the admittedly injured Pelicans. But a bad surprise for me has been Jonathan Kuminga. And a lot of this, I think, is on the Warriors front office. Because the Warriors, with their draft picks in the past few years, I think they've reacted too late on some things. They haven't been proactive. We think about James Wiseman, for example. James Wiseman, you know, you miss on some picks, that's okay. But when it was still clear that James Wiseman wasn't going to fit into the Warriors system in like year two, end of year two, I think that was pretty evident. He wasn't ever going to fit in this system. You could have traded him then. His value still would have been very high. He's a second overall pick. You know, a lot of teams would have taken a flyer on him and given you something significant back. They didn't do that. They lost him for, I don't even know what they lost him for, to the Pistons? Where is he now?
Right now, he's on Indiana, but he's out for the season with a torn Achilles.
Right, I did see that injury.
And that would have been good, too, because Indiana is, again, one of those teams that have a very good development system. It would have been great to see him, but unfortunately.
So, I think they were late for that boat to trade Wiseman. And then Kuminga and Moses Moody, those two picks, they had two very high picks that lottery, number 7 and number 14. Leading up to everyone was like, maybe you could package them together and trade them to contend now, to win now. Because it was evident that Steph Curry's window is closing. You know, he's getting older, even though he is still phenomenal. So they used those picks. They didn't trade it. And then last year they hit on AirPods. He's been great. But back to Kuminga for a second. Everyone expected, now that Klay is gone, this is Kuminga's time to shine, right? Naturally, he's going to take over. He's going to be the superstar that we think he can be. And that's not been the case. He's been pretty disappointing. And when he has looked good, it hasn't mattered. They haven't rewarded him with more minutes or more starts. He started the first 3 games of the season and then immediately got dropped by Steve Kerr. And I guess if you're saying the team is winning, then I guess Steve Kerr made an okay decision. But just for Kuminga and the Warriors' future in general, Kuminga's value is tanking. And now the Warriors are saying that he's available on the market. There are reports that Jonathan Kuminga is available on the market, and he's not happy with his development. This was a quote that came from one of the Warriors insiders, Sam Amick. And a quote from him as well is that rival executives believe that the Warriors are more willing than ever to include Kuminga in a trade package. And this is pretty funny because when we were talking about the Pascal Siakam trade a year ago, the Warriors were a landing spot for Pascal. And the trade could have gone through if the Warriors hadn't said that Kuminga is untouchable. Imagine a tandem of Steph Curry, Siakam. Maybe they would have kept Klay and Draymond Green. That would have been a pretty great team. And now they have Kuminga, who's not playing for them and on the trade market. What do you make of that?
I think Kuminga, heading into this season, his contract dispute created a distraction for the team almost, because I believe he was requesting like a full max contract, $250+ million, and obviously when you clearly haven't shown that level of value, and then you're using it against your own team, saying you might hold out and your play doesn't match that, it's gonna cause rifts in the social media, within your own locker room. So heading into the season, Kuminga had a lot to prove, but he hasn't met expectations that much. He's had like a couple good games, but like they were inefficient and he was getting smoked on defense in a couple of those games. I just think he dug his own grave heading into the season, and it's not helping his case that there's other guys who are stepping up, like Brandon Pajemski is doing great. Buddy Hield, who they acquired this offseason, is having a career year with the Warriors. And I don't know if they look towards a guy like Moses Moody and then what their plan is for this season, whether they're going to contend with Steph once he comes back, or they're placing some type of foresight on their future. Kuminga, he handled his own situation poorly, and the Warriors handled this situation poorly in terms of what they could have gotten for him. And now, like you said, his value is tanking very rapidly.
Yeah, it is disappointing to see. I think one last disappointment for me, it was the Pelicans, and it's not their fault they have injuries, but I am disappointed that they have injuries. 4 out of their top 6 players have been out. You have Herb Jones, CJ McCollum, DeJounte Murray, who was a new addition. We were all so excited to see that, and Trey Murphy as well. So they've lost those players. They've lost games. Jordan Hawkins, who was a pretty bright young spot for them, he's also having lower back spasms. So it's disappointing. And this is all without Zion being injured. And we know that's coming sometime in the future, unfortunately.
It's crazy.
It's just the unfortunate truth of his career so far. I'm praying for a healthy season for him, but even with these injuries, the signs aren't looking good. They're 27th in three-point attempt rate. And if you want to be a great team in this league, you can't not be a non-shooting team. You have to have a three-point threat, because a lot of teams will blow you out with threes. You look at the Celtics, they're going to hit a million threes on you every night, and you're not going to have a chance. So they have to find a way to combat that.
And it's so sad because the Pelicans are such an exciting team when they are healthy. Like, you think back a couple of years ago when they were at their healthiest point, and they were like a top 3 seed in the West, a bloodbath of a Western Conference, and they were just cruising through. And then again, their injuries start to derail them. The biggest winner of this entire situation is Brandon Ingram, because we know he wants his payday. He wants about $50 million per season on his next contract, and he's playing lights out. He's averaging over 23 points per game, shooting very efficiently on all 3 levels. He is a legit building block, and I think he's proving that. Like, that all-star level potential that we saw coming out of Duke is coming to life, but the biggest losers are just the Pelicans as a whole. Like, it was such a well-rounded group outside of, their center issues, but Yves Missi is stepping up huge, like you talked about. He was going to be great. DeJounte Murray had an amazing opening night game when he came in with the Pelicans, almost fitting seamlessly. CJ McCollum, for once, isn't shooting inconsistently. Zion Williamson is at an all-star, all-NBA level player, I should say. Just a well-rounded 3-and-D team, had super high expectations, and it almost feels like I'm a broken record now. They're just injured and hopeless.
Yeah, it is. It is more of the same. Every year they deal with some injuries that derails their season, and we say, oh, maybe next season will be different. I think one last thing for today, we'd be doing a disservice to this team if we didn't talk about them, because we've talked about the Cavaliers being amazing and being unbeaten so far, but they're not the only unbeaten team. The Oklahoma City Thunder, 7-0 so far, and I just want to touch on them for real quick, because they look like maybe the greatest defensive team that's been assembled.
Yeah.
You look at their players. Who would you say is their best defensive player?
It's crazy because that's not even like a definitive answer. Like, you could say Lou Dort, you could say Alex Caruso, you could say Kayson Wallace.
You could say Chet Holmgren. They
Yeah.
have multiple all-NBA defenders. Even Shea has been locking up this season. You know, he's been getting in the passing lanes. He's been doing his job defensively. And it's just everything's clicking for them. They have an MVP candidate in Shea. Jalen Williams, MIP candidate. Chet Holmgren, DPOY candidate. They're just stacked. And where do you see their season going? How good can they win the championship, or are they still too young?
No, that whole thing about inexperience and age is just out of the window. I think they're winning the West, and they're going to win the West comfortably this year. Like you said, they're on pace to be an all-time defensive team. They have such a well-constructed roster in that 3-and-D formula that won the Celtics the championship last year. Once Isaiah Hartenstein comes back too, oh my goodness, their ability to create on the margins is going to be great. Rebounding, forcing more turnovers on the interior. And their depth is so good too. Like Isaiah Joe is having a career year. Aaron Wiggins is really good. I see them going all the way through the West at least. I think the Celtics are still going to win the championship. No bias, but yeah. What about you? What's a realistic expectation for them?
I think you're right. I definitely think they'll be the top seed in the West, and they'll make it to the conference finals at least, minimum. I'm sure of that, and like barring some devastating injury to one of their players, which hopefully does not happen. But I think we're beginning to see the value of continuity in this league, because you think about it, OKC, these group of stars have been together for at least 2 seasons. Chet's been there for 3. He was injured his first season, but he's been with the group. They added a couple like small players here and there with big impact in Alex Caruso, Ihart, and then the Cavs as well. Continuity. Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen. They've been together for a couple of years now. Boston Celtics, they didn't really change much. They're still keeping going with the same core. And then you look at the teams who made drastic changes over the past couple of years. Look at the Suns, who made a big trade for KD. Hasn't really worked out.
The Nets a couple of years ago.
The Nets, a big trade for KD. Also didn't work out.
KD, Kyrie, Harden, yeah.
You look at the Bucks, a massive trade for Dame. Hasn't worked out. So I think we're really starting to see the value of continuity in this league, and I'm hoping more teams will look towards this and realize that what they have in their teams is valuable, and they don't always have to look for superstar names to get better.
Yeah, I think the formula for GMs nowadays should be focusing on developing your homegrown talent when you know that you're in a period that you can't necessarily contend. Grow them to a level that you're playoff caliber, and then add without subtracting with names that are complementary and not necessarily like big splash moves that don't fit your timeline. Like the Celtics, they built around Tatum and Brown. The OKC Thunder now are building around guys like Shea, J-Dub, and Chet. It's just the proper formula to winning, and it's a credit to their front office with Sam Presti and then the Celtics with Brad Stevens. But I think the finals matchup this year will be Celtics and Thunder, and I could see it legitimately going to 7.
Yeah, it could go to 7, and hopefully it'll end with a Thunder win.
Bro, chill.
I do not want to see the Celtics win anymore. You guys got 1. I think that's more than enough for you guys. Just be satisfied with that. Be happy with that, and ride that out until we'll wait another when was your last one before this? 12 years?
Shockingly, with Doc Rivers in 2008.
Hopefully it'll be that long before you guys get another. And then my Raptors, of course, will get one next year.
When I'm in my grave.
Next year. Grady Dick has been the best sophomore player so far this season.
I don't even disagree with that. Like, I can't lie. Crazy.
Yeah. This is pretty insane. Okay, I think that's all for today. Quick fire. Best performance from last night. What was your favorite performance from last night?
Favorite performance from last night? I'm going to go with Jokic's triple-double. I mean, because, again, he's just showing why he's an all-world MVP caliber player. And that entire game between the Nuggets and Raptors, going down to a final shot from RJ Barrett, which he missed, unfortunately. But great game. What about you? Hand it off.
I think I'll have to go with Darius Garland getting 39. I just love to see his resurgence. People were writing him off last year, and yeah, I think that's where we'll leave it out for today. Thank you for another great episode.
Thank you.
It's more than just a game.